when we do a heart transplant, the patient who receives the transplant receives an organ that doesn't belong to him, belongs to another person. So his immunologic system doesn't recognize this organ as belonging to this body. So the immunologic system creates antibodies against this organ. And this can cause rejection. And this rejection can be acute, and the patient becomes very sick and the heart doesn't beat well, and we have to treat it. And sometimes we need to bring the patient in the hospital and in the intensive care unit and so forth. Or it can be a slow type of rejection, which is chronic rejection. You know, every patient after heart transplantation receives immunosuppressant medications that suppress the immunologic system so that they make the immunologic system weaker in a way that the immunologic system doesn't attack the transplanted heart as much. But still, there is a slow rejection process which is more prominent in some patients versus others. And this rejection manifests itself as calcifications and atherosclerosis of the arteries of the heart. Okay? Just like a normal patient who has a heart attack and develops plaques in his coronary arteries. The same thing happens with this low chronic rejection, causes atherosclerosis of the arteries in the transplanted heart. And this is one of the ways that the transplanted heart fails. Okay? And that's why we follow the patients, and every year or two, the patients have an angiogram of their arteries because we want to see if they are developing this process or not.
How long can a heart or lung transplant organ can be healthy in the new body?
Okay, there are, as long as my longest patient was 25 years, okay? And he died at age 90. And there is a great variability from patient to patient on how long their transplanted heart is going to work. And is related to multiple factors. One is the age of the patient. One is the reason why the patient needs a heart transplant. Another is the patient's sex, is male or female. Sometimes the race also is a factor. But I think the most important is the patient's age. The patients who have the biggest benefits are the patients in general, middle-aged patients, patients in their early 60s or mid-60s, because the immunologic system in this age group is starting to become weaker with aging. And so the transplanted heart can last longer.
How do you know a percentage of people in the United States that have signed for organ donations?
I don't know the exact numbers. But as you know, when you apply for a driver license, you have to declare if you want to be an organ donor or not. Okay? But in any case, even if you declare that you want to be an organ donor, your family can express the desire of not donating organs, and then the doctors find themselves in a pretty bad situation because they don't want to upset the family in these very, very delicate moments. But in general, if a person has checked the box to be an organ donor, we follow this person's wishes. Okay, but I wouldn't be able to tell you. Only a minority of people have signed up to be an organ donor. And we still have a very big problem for lack of organs for any type of transplants.
And this question is not about organs transplantation. It's if you have a patient that is brain dead, how hard is for the family if they don't have a signed paper from the patient to plug him out, to unplug the patient?
To unplug the patient. Oh, if the patient is brain dead, no problems. Okay? If the patient has been declared brain dead and there are criteria, okay, to declare a patient brain dead, you have to get a neurologist involved, you have to different ways to do it, to do an EEG or to do an angiography of the arteries that go to the brain. But if he's declared brain dead, it can be unplugged right away. The problem is if the patient is not brain dead, that's when the issues come up.
And I would like you to tell me a little bit more, without a question, about the donations, the organ donations.
You know, organ donations, we have a separate organization in the United States called UNOS, United Network for Organ Sharing, that establishes the rules of organ donation. And then in every area there is a local organ donations agency, okay, which is independent from the hospitals. And their job is to identify donors in all the hospitals. And the hospitals are tuned into this process. And when there is a patient that is close to be brain dead or is brain dead, they get in touch with this local agency, and the local agency sends a coordinator who goes there, and once the patient is brain dead, they approach the family. So they are completely independent from the hospitals who do the transplant. They approach the family and see if they are interested in donating organs, okay? And if they are interested, then they check this patient who is brain dead and see which organs are good. Because in the process of becoming, the patient may have been in a car accident, so he may have damaged some of the organs. So first they identify which organs are good, and then they start looking at the lists of patients who need a transplant. For example, there is a list of patients who need a heart transplant, and this list is made very carefully on a priority basis. The sickest patient has a priority, and then it depends also on how long a patient has been waiting. So there are different criteria, and automatically in the computer the patient's name comes up, as well as the hospital where he is, or the hospital where his transplant is going to be done. So this agency calls the hospital and say, we have a donor for this patient, and the process starts.
How many patients can be saved or healed by a dead person?
Oh, well, we can transplant a heart, so one patient. We can transplant 2 lungs, one lung in one patient, one lung in another patient. We can transplant a kidney. We can transplant the pancreas. Kidney, we can transplant 2 patients, okay? So, kidney, 2 patients, the pancreas, the liver. So 7 patients can benefit from a donor.
And also the corneas, yes.
And the cornea. So 8 patients, yeah.